Thank you so much. And welcome to Candace. Phil, can you highlight our wonderful guest? Hey, Candace, what a pleasure.
Good evening, afternoon, good morning, where everyone is.
Well, thank you so much for your willingness to do this. I know you are incredibly busy, and we are thrilled to pieces to have you. So the full bio for Candace was in your reminder letter. It's on our website. And if you haven't got that memorized, the short version is that Candace Laughinghouse is a PhD student at the Chicago Theological Seminary. She is a hereditary Pentecostal preacher, with that distinction going way back in her family. And she is a recognized authority on eco-womanist theology and animal rights. Plus, she's the mom of 3 beautiful daughters. Welcome, Candace.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So excited to be here. Thank you for this opportunity and everything right now. Of course, I feel so much part of community already. So I'm excited to be here.
Well, we met because Candace is going to be part of a panel at the Parliament of the World Religions in August. So our friend at Culture and Animals Foundation, Martin Rowe, who's also part of the Compassion Consortium Advisory Board, introduced us. So Candace, to just jump in on the theological front, I think that a lot of people are confused between Pentecostal and evangelical. Can you just explain to us those distinctions?
Clear about that one.
Okay.
Well, in short and brief, and I appreciate you for bringing that up as far as like my background Pentecostal, because that was really I'm grateful for it. There are things we're grateful for as far as our history, and some things we have to learn and unlearn. There's definitely some things that I'm so happy that as far as like our identity. So I grew up in the Black Pentecostal Church of God in Christ. Are any of you, wave of hands or something, familiar with Bishop Yvette Flunder with the UCC? Okay, so she comes out of the same tradition. In fact, our families are really close. And I remember seeing her at Princeton at an event, and she said, "I'm so happy you're here. We need more of us to kind of get out and, have these conversations." And one of the things in being Pentecostal is being aware and very attuned with spirit. And this definitely ties in with my work as an eco-womanist. An eco-womanist that is bringing attention and awareness to the placement that's already within indigenous traditions, specific to my own as a woman of African descent, being a connection with humanity, nature, and spirit. Okay. And so as a Pentecostal, let me get to that important one. It's quite different from evangelicalism. Now, you had the evangelical movements. I teach religious studies too, so that's totally different. Of course, we know, I think it was around about the late 70s when that was in early 80s when evangelicalism and the concept of moral majority began to really, rise. And we know a lot of that is centered around like televangelism. So it is quite different, although there are evangelicals that can kind of identify as Pentecostal, but and there are some Pentecostals who I look at and sadly I'm like, you're agreeing with people who don't care anything about you. So it is different on the front of today's understanding, especially with our political climate. Evangelicalism has really taken on a persistence of white supremacy, just to say it, what it is, and connecting that with an even more, I don't want to say even more colonized. How many more colonized can your Christianity be? But still, we know that it's rooted in, capitalism and seeing and maintaining this, what me and my mentor identify as a white male patriarchal, misogynist, toxic, capitalist system. So it is quite different, but I think both of them on the surface between evangelicalism and Pentecostalism kind of veer not so heavily on the standards or protocols to being within the tradition. And so that of course allows room for more people who may not have being aware of all the steps to take, and being operating in the church. So it's more what they call spirit filled, I guess you would say. So I hope that makes a difference. I want to be clear, I am a reformed Pentecostal, but not evangelical. So it was a little less work.
Got it. Well, you
But
were in the
work.
company of, reformed lawyers and all kinds of, we got our own Reformation going on here.
Oh, I understand that too. I wanted to go to law school at first too, believe it or not. And Lord said different. I ended up in the seminary. Go figure.
Well, these are all ways, to change the
Yeah.
world. So in
Yeah.
your first theology class at Emory University, I read a professor suggested that you explore the religious concept of breath of life. What is that, and where did it take you?
Yeah, that was in my first. Actually, I have been in the PhD program since 2010. I had to change schools. COVID happened. All these. Now, mind you, a PhD. I think Harvard put something out that a PhD takes in Bible theology about 8 years. Now we know that's really for a white male with a partner, So add on being not white, not male, a mother, having children, divorced, COVID, deaths in the family, add all that other stuff. So it's a lot more. So the first school that I did attend, because when I graduated from I did my MDiv at Emory and my THM at Duke. And when I graduated to look at PhD programs, it was at the beginning of the recession. So everyone shut everything down. And at the encouragement of one of the founding womanist scholars, Dr. Katie Cannon, she said, find a school where there's someone that can support your work and get you through. Don't worry about the name, find that. And so there was a woman at Regent, y'all believe it or not, Regent. What's the name? Pat Robertson School. Speaking of evangelicals, they actually had a very progressive faculty at one time, believe it or not. And there was a woman there, Strilda Alexander, that was writing on womanism from a Pentecostalist perspective, which was interesting to me as someone that was recovering. When I say recovering in Pentecostalism, because within my church tradition, women do everything, but you're still not, equal. You all are familiar with that.
So animal rescue is full of that.
Oh, right. That's what I learned too. So she was guiding me along. And then when things started to shut down at the school, they started to get rid of people. This was actually right towards the beginning of Obama's first term. They were getting ready. And a professor there who does a lot of work on pneumatology, the study of the spirit, he said he was reading something. He said, have you ever thought of doing something on a pneumatology of animals? He said, I know you're vegan. And I said, wow. So and pneumatology is a study of the spirit. And therefore, when I look in Genesis, there are only two beings that are given the breath of life. And it is explained in Genesis, and that is human animals and non-human animals. They both have the Ruah, the Spirit of God. And that brought me to Googling, is there something called animal theology? And of course, it ended up, learning about Andrew Lindsay and everyone. And then as I began to read and grasp more, I then began to read books like by Peter Paris on the spirituality of African people. And I saw so many connections, even down to just a podcast I was listening to by a woman. Her name is Colleen Patrick Goudreau, Compassionate Cooks. And she said, we are to be compassionate and caring. I'm like, where have I heard about this compassion stuff? Oh, Jesus, right. So maybe there is some connection here. And from then on, I began to also look at, and we can look at even the room here. And when I talk about caring for the earth and animals, we know that has been presented as a white thing, a white person's thing, and not something that definitely not African Americans are solely concerned with. And so I began to dive deep into that and understanding that these opinions are based on who is seen as the authoritative voices. And so then I began to unpack and see that authoritative voices of caring for the earth and animals go back farther than we can imagine. And therefore, I began to find not only within the culture of African and indigenous spaces that there are women. I focus on a lot of Black women or women of African descent leading these areas of caring for earth and animals.
Wow. So help us understand another term, womanist. So we're following you on everything.
Sure. Can I share a screen?
Absolutely. Can you?
Okay.
You make that possible, Phil? Okay.
I'll start here and I'll just go quickly. Can you all see this?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm not going to read everything or go through. So this here, womanism comes from, this is a term from Alice Walker. Many of you have heard of Alice Walker. She wrote Color Purple, tons of other things. And so womanism, there are 4 principles that are important. As a Black literary writer, this is important because she said womanism is one, and we rephrase these as radical subjectivity, and that is defining oneself as womanish. And as an African-American woman, we've always heard, young girls, stay out of grown folks' business, stop being womanish. That was something that was not encouraged. But someone who's womanish is outrageous, audacious, and courageous, and wants to know more that is considered good for one. So you are basically redefining who you are against white heteronormative descriptions of oneself. The second principle is a lover of women, sexual or non-sexually, appreciative of women's culture, value, strength. Here's the key thing that separates, and this will get into the 4th principle, womanism from definitely earlier feminism, is that womanism realized that I cannot be for myself without being a lover of men and the entire community. So the second principle has been redefined as, not redefined, or a term given to as communal praxis. Of course, you see they're not separatists only for health reasons. If you're in an unhealthy relationship, you need to be a separatist. Okay. 3, loves music, dance, moon, spirit, herself, and the folk, regardless of what everything is around. And then 4 says here, womanist is to feminist as purple is to lavender. And we know purple is unique and different from lavender, but then there's kind of the same, right? So that's womanism. And so what happened was there were 2 professors at Union Theological Seminary, the late James Hall Cone, who's known as the father of Black theology. Really quickly, Black theology is basically a look at theology from a Black perspective. For example, seeing Jesus as Black. He was from, as we say, from the ghetto. He was an enemy of the state. He was innocent and he was murdered. How much more Black could Jesus be? So that is, so he's his father of Black theology. And the other one was Beverly Harrison, and she was a feminist. So both of them encouraged, they had students to pursue, because these students at Union realized that some of the greatest challenges they had were from other Black men in the church, in the clergy. And so they began to say, we need to define and understand theology from an African-American woman's perspective. So therefore, it's a God talk, a description of God that represents women of African diaspora, okay? And for me, I take this and say that everything that womanism is complete. But then I do add on that I identify as an eco-womanist, but then I also add in to be intentional and anti-speciesist eco-womanist, because there are women writing on eco-womanism, but what is I found to be missing is reflection on the oppression of animals as well. So I already talked about these 2 professors. Some of their students, as I mentioned, Dr. Katie Cannon, the ethicist. Jacqueline Grant is a biblical womanist. One of her greatest texts is White Women's Christ, Black Women's Jesus. Kelly Brown Douglas, who someone here is from Union, so I know they know who Kelly Brown Douglas is, and Dolores Williams, who recently passed. And she had a wonderful critique that many people could not accept about communion. And actually, Dr. Terrell is my chair of my committee, and is also a student and actual researcher for Dr. James Holcomb. And Dr. Stacey Floyd Thomas is she's at Vanderbilt, a renowned scholar on womanist ethics. And she's the one that renamed these 4 areas of womanism. Here are some books that I use, a few of them. Of course, In Search of Our Mother's Garden has the article on womanism. Stacey Floyd Thomas text, which I really love, is because you know what? Everyone in here can be womanist, but what we identify as that every African American woman are the only ones who can embody womanism. But it is important that we need womanists, right? Just like it's important that we need men to, not be sexist, even though they benefit from a system of sexism. Melanie Harris wrote a text, which I think was brilliant, to call it eco-womanism, because no one had a text called eco-womanism. So that comes up right away. But what I discuss is this missing context of animals. And did you want me to stop there? Or did you want me to say something else about animals that I was?
Please do. We'd love to hear what you have to say about animals.
That's great. So, in my dissertation, I discussed Fannie Lou Hamer's involvement with the earth, and of course, Wangari Maathai out of Kenya. But the thing is that even as these women were returning to earth and found that reclamation of identity through the earth connected to a reclaiming of culture, especially Wangari, realized that this had an effect also on nature and on our animals as well. And I have this picture here. Has anyone seen this picture before?
I have not.
Okay. So this, I can't get it to stop. Okay. This picture here is actually, I forgot who donated, but this is an actual sculpture in the ground in the Atlantic Ocean. And it's to represent the many men, women, and I'm sure children that were either thrown over slave ships or jumped, which some people would say, I remember there was an ending to, of course, the most popular movie for us, like Black Panther, where the cousin said, I'm a survivor. I'm not one of those that jump. I mean, but if you think about the trauma that's going on, sometimes the escape and sometimes the most form of resistance is a decision like this. And this brought me to, I don't have I don't know how to get out of here. Okay. This brought me to, which I think you all will find interesting, the final chapter of my dissertation. And what happened was I was reluctantly, my daughter's class, or reluctantly I went, my daughter's class had a field trip. I'm in Raleigh to the North Carolina State dairy farm. So all my children have never eaten meat or anything. And so, but they know about some of these things. And so I was really proud my 9-year-old was not here for it. And I said, let me just go. It's like, going into, as we say in the church, the enemy's camp. So I said, let me go hear how these people think. And of course, it was really troubling. And when we got to the one specific area where the calves were kept, and of course, the tour guides were making this sound like, oh, it's just such a beautiful place. And I said, a parent said, well, what happens to the calves? And I immediately said, oh, well, they're either veal or they're kept for the production. And the owner, or the guy that lead, he said, oh, that's not correct. That's what people think, And they used another term called they're grown out. And I said, well, can you explain what that actually means? And so one of the young ladies that was a tour guide, and she told us, look, she's had 4 years experience on this. And she said that they are proud of their research in that they're working on reintroducing maternal instincts to the dairy cows. Full pause right there. I'm a mother. I breastfed all of mine to like 3, 4 years old. I understood, which was almost like a resistance to the culture here, like past 2 months, you're crazy. And so when she said we're scientists, which of course I'm like, okay, these men are going to reintroduce maternal instincts to a mother. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, there came a time where we had to pull a mother off of her calf because she had chewed the tail and had maimed the calf, and we saved. So these dairy cows, which they don't refer to them cows, notice the term dairy cow. Their identity is consumed with this, false label of being a dairy, cow. And she said, we had to remove her to save the cow. And I said, well, did you ever think of the environment the mother is in? And it immediately brought me to a book by Toni Morrison called Beloved. I don't know if anyone has read that. It's
Sure.
actually based off of a true story. Margaret Garner was a woman in Kentucky. She and her husband and her in-laws were fleeing Kentucky, go to Canada. They were going across the Ohio River, and they had a contact, and somehow, and it's her 4 children with her, and somehow the police, also the Klan, also the slave catchers, were sent out to find them. And they were in a home, and when I say the home, Margaret Garner and her husband and her in-laws and her 4 children, and the Klan came and barricaded the house in. And what she did was, and this was a part of the movie Beloved, in the book, is that she ended up slitting the throat of, I think, the two of them, and then she killed the baby, which is probably closest in her arms. And I immediately thought of that because I read the actual interview from The Liberator, which was a newspaper that Du Bois and them was sent out for anti-abolitionist, campaign. They had a newspaper called The Liberator. And she said that this was the only way where she could set her children free. And we're in such a climate that creates a mother's choice to free her child through death. And for me, I began to look at how this umbrella of capitalism and white supremacy brings oppressed beings, which now is shared experience with what I saw at the dairy farm, and also amongst another mother to mother differently.
Oh, bless
and
you.
What I end up doing is looking at it from a theological and ethical lens, and I called it a maternal altruistic maternal filicide.
Wow.
Because out of love, these mothers are forced to mother differently. And I understand that I have to be very careful in making connections like this. In fact, I spent about 5 pages saying, look, I'm not saying Black women are cows, nor am I saying cows are human. But looking at things and the effects and the great effects of things, and making these connections, especially as a mother myself. And even if I know not everyone has a great experience with their mothers, we all have mothers, whether we have a relationship with them or not, we all have mothers. So for this shared oppression for me is something that I try to, I have to be very careful about it, like I said,
Sure.
because it's so new and different, and people do not want to they don't want to be equated to animals. But even that right there is very much a colonized perspective, because if you look at but you talking about first indigenous to this land, to Africa, there's connections always with a certain animal, and it's in
Yes.
pride. But of course, through colonization, there is this, immediate disruption of that. And so I use these discussions, and even really quickly, I use even the work of W.B. Du Bois as what I would say is a forerunner of environmental justice, who said the biggest and easiest way to get people of African descent to remove or not understand their culture is to build this false relationship between themselves and nature. And that's what slavery did.
Oh,
so.
Well, that is powerful. And I'm so sorry we have to stop there. I think this could go on for hours.
Sorry, I talked too long.
No,
Sorry.
Maybe one of these days we can have a workshop with you and just really get around the Zoom campfire and really, pass through some of this stuff and learn more. Thank you so much for being with us today. I so look forward to hearing you again at the Parliament of the World's Religion in August, and I will pass it on to the next event. Bless you.